She was barely out of her teens when she entered Ravensbrück. Not a soldier, not a hardened officer, just a young woman stepping into a system that was already built to break people. On paper, Ravensbrück was a labor camp, but in reality, over 120,000 women passed through its gates, and tens of thousands never came back out. You felt it before you understood it. The silence, the hunger, the waiting, and then the footsteps. At first, she was just another recruit, another uniform, another face among many. But that didn't last. Because while others hesitated, or quietly left after seeing what the camp really was, she stayed. And not only did she stay, she rose. Fast. You didn't look at her for long. Not if you wanted to avoid attention. Because attention meant pain. By her early 20s, she wasn't just following orders anymore. She was giving them. Deciding punishments, controlling lives. Becoming something the camp itself seemed to reward. And that's where this story turns. Because this isn't just about what happened inside Ravensbrück. It's about how someone so young could step into a place like that and choose to become part of it. Because her story doesn't end in that camp, it ends on a scaffold. If you want the story's history doesn't soften, the ones that force you to ask uncomfortable questions. Subscribe now. Because this one only gets darker from here. Ravensbrück concentration camp wasn't just another camp in the Nazi system. It was the largest concentration camp built specifically for women. Established in 1939, just as the war began to spread across Europe, it became a central hub in a network designed not just to detain, but to exhaust, exploit, and erase. More than 120,000 women passed through its gates. Political prisoners, resistance fighters, and those the regime labeled undesirable, including many Jews, the homeless, and the marginalized. At least 30,000 died here. Some were executed. Many more simply disappeared into the system. You didn't count days, not here. You counted survival in moments. One roll call, one meal, one night without being taken. The camp operated on a structure of strict hierarchy. Orders flowed from SS command down through layers of supervision, many of them women. Wardresses, overseers, enforcers. Some arrived believing it was just a job. Clerical work, discipline, routine. But the reality they stepped into demanded something else. You saw it in their faces, the new ones. Some looked away, couldn't handle it. And then, they were gone. And that's what makes Ravensbrück different. Leaving was possible. There are records confirming that some female guards resigned after witnessing the brutality. No punishment. No arrest. No consequence. They simply walked away. But others didn't. They adapted, adjusted, learned the rules of the system, and then began to enforce them. Sometimes more harshly than required. And in a place where cruelty wasn't just tolerated, but quietly rewarded. The line between obedience and something far darker began to disappear. Dorothea Binz wasn't born into power. She came from a modest background in Germany. No influence, no status, no clear future waiting for her. By her mid-teens, she was already working, washing dishes, doing whatever she could to get by. Then came the regime. And with it, opportunity. By the late 1930s, the SS had begun recruiting women into auxiliary roles. Clerical work, communications, camp supervision. Positions that didn't require wealth or connections. Only loyalty and willingness. Binz joined around 1939 and was sent to Ravensbrück concentration camp. At first, nothing remarkable. Kitchen duty. Routine tasks. Just another uniform in a system already in motion. You could always tell the new ones. They moved slower, looked around too much. Still trying to understand where they were. But something shifted. Within a month, she was promoted. From kitchen worker to guard. And then, she kept moving. Up the hierarchy. Faster than most. By her early 20s, she was no longer just enforcing rules. She was helping shape them. Eventually becoming deputy chief wardress. Responsible for discipline, training, and control over thousands of prisoners. We heard her name before we saw her. That was enough. And this is where the pattern becomes clear. Because Ravensbrück didn't just tolerate cruelty, it rewarded those who embraced it. Efficiency meant control. Control meant fear. And fear meant power. Some guards hesitated and left. But Binz didn't hesitate. She adapted. Quickly. And that raises a harder question. Was she shaped by the system? Or did she simply find a place where what was already inside her finally had room to grow? Because by the time she reached the top, she wasn't just part of Ravensbrück anymore. She had become one of the reasons it was feared. By 1943, Dorothea Binz had reached a position few others ever did. Deputy Chief Wardress at Ravensbrück concentration camp. Authority over thousands. Control over punishment. Influence over life and death. On record, her role was administrative. Discipline. Training. Oversight. But records don't capture behavior. People do. You didn't need to be told when she was near. You felt it. The way the block went quiet, the way bodies stiffened. Survivor testimonies describe a pattern. Not random violence. Not uncontrolled rage. Something colder. Deliberate. She carried a whip, sometimes a stick, sometimes whatever was closest. And she used it, often. Not just to punish, but to assert presence. She didn't rush it. That's what made it worse. Historian accounts estimate that thousands of prisoners passed under her authority during her tenure. Punishments escalated under supervisors like her: beatings, forced labor assignments, isolation. Many who entered the punishment blocks didn't come back out. You tried to disappear in the line. Head down, eyes low. But sometimes she'd still pick you. No reason, no warning. And then there were the selections. Decisions about who was fit and who wasn't. Who worked. Who weakened. Who vanished. But here's what stands out. Others in the same position didn't behave like this. Some enforced rules. Some looked away. A few quietly resigned. She didn't. And within the structure of the camp, that difference mattered. Because cruelty wasn't just allowed. It was noticed. Promoted. Given more room to operate. So the question isn't whether she had power. It's what she chose to do with it. Because in Ravensbrück, power didn't corrupt slowly. It revealed things, quickly. By this point, the facts are clear. Dorothea Binz had power. She used it. And she used it brutally. But facts alone don't explain behavior. Because inside Ravensbrück concentration camp, there was always a choice. Limited, yes. Controlled, absolutely. But not absent. Records and testimonies confirm something uncomfortable. Some guards saw what was happening. And they left. No punishment. No prison. No retaliation. They simply walked away. We noticed the ones who disappeared. Not prisoners, guards. One day they were there, the next, gone. And for a moment, you wondered why the others stayed. That's where this story shifts. Because it's easy to explain cruelty as obedience. Orders. Pressure. Fear. But that explanation starts to weaken when people around you make a different choice. So what made her stay? Ambition? Belief in the system? Or something deeper, something harder to admit? The system rewarded efficiency. Efficiency meant control. Control often meant violence. And those who carried it out without hesitation rose. But not everyone wanted to rise that way. Some of them couldn't even watch. You could see it in their faces. They'd turn away, step back, hesitate. She never did. And that difference is where responsibility lives. Because at some point, it stops being about the system and starts being about the individual inside it. So before we go further, ask yourself, if you were placed in that environment, with the same options, the same pressures, the same opportunity to leave, would you have walked away? By early 1945, everything was beginning to fall apart. The Third Reich was collapsing in on itself. Allied forces were advancing from multiple directions, faster than the system could respond. And camps like Ravensbrück concentration camp were running out of time. Orders came down quickly. Evacuate. Move the prisoners. Erase what could be erased. What followed became known as the death marches. thousands of prisoners forced out of the camp, driven on foot across long distances, with little food, little rest. Anyone who couldn't keep up was left behind. You walked because stopping wasn't an option, feet bleeding, lungs burning, and still, they kept shouting, keep moving, keep moving. In the chaos, structure broke down. Command blurred. Guards scattered. Some tried to maintain control. Others started thinking about themselves. And somewhere along that shifting line, Dorothea Binz made a decision. She fled. Not as an officer. Not as someone in control. But as someone trying to disappear before everything caught up. For a brief moment, it almost worked. But the war was closing in too fast. On May 3, 1945, she was captured by British forces in Hamburg. No uniform to hide behind. No authority left. I remember thinking, so this is how it ends. Not in power, not in control. Just caught, like anyone else. And just like that, the system that had elevated her was gone. But what she had done inside it wasn't. Because now, for the first time, she would have to answer for it. After the war, there was no immediate closure. Only questions. Investigations, testimonies, survivors stepping forward to describe what had happened inside Ravensbrück concentration camp. And among the names brought forward was Dorothea Binz. The trials took place in Hamburg between 1946 and 1947. Former camp staff were charged with war crimes, abuse, murder, systematic cruelty. She admitted to some of the beatings, but not the full extent described by witnesses, not the pattern, not the intent. And yet, the testimonies were consistent. Too consistent. People don't forget that kind of fear. Not the voice, not the footsteps, not the way it felt when she stopped in front of you. In the end, the court reached its decision. Death by hanging. She appealed, requested clemency, hoped for a different outcome. It didn't come. On May 2, 1947, inside Hamelin prison, the sentence was carried out. Quietly, efficiently, final. No crowd, no spectacle. Just the same system of order, turned in the opposite direction. And that's where her story ends. But not the question it leaves behind. Because Ravensbrück wasn't built by one person. And it didn't function because of one person. It was a system, sustained by individuals, making choices within it. Some walked away. Some looked away. And some stepped forward. So when we look back at stories like this, it's not just about what happened then. It's about understanding what people are capable of, when given power, when given permission, when given the chance to choose. If you want more stories that don't just tell you what happened, but make you question why, subscribe, because history doesn't repeat itself by accident. It repeats through people.